Hello and welcome. Thank you so much, those of you who are out there, for joining us on the Data is for Doing live office hour or half hour. Today, I am joined by special guest Sofía Jacky-Rosell from Argentina. So it's late for her, and she's been very accommodating to do this at a time that works for a lot of other people. I'm Bart Poulson, and I am in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. Now, I just want to start off very quickly by mentioning that we are streaming this live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and people can participate from any of those. In addition, this session is being recorded, and it will be available as a video on all three of those platforms immediately after we're done. And before I get started, I want to invite anybody who is watching this to make a comment and say hello and tell us where you're located. Now, I know from the people who registered that a lot of you are in Argentina, but historically, we've had audiences from around the world. Anyhow, so if please feel free, get online, put in a comment, say hello, tell us where you're located. And as other questions come up, we would love to hear from you. So again, I'm Bart Poulson. I'm the creator of Data is for Doing and also the company Data Lab. And I also make videos on statistics and data science for LinkedIn Learning. But an important thing I've mentioned in some of my newsletters is I have a background in design. I was drawing pictures my entire life. And my first 3 years in college, I studied design. I took drawing classes, I took color theory classes, I took two-dimensional and three-dimensional design, and I did that for 3 years with the idea of becoming a professional designer, but through what I thought was very unusual set of circumstances, I ended up in psychology. I have a PhD in social psychology, but second, I ended up working in data. And then when I made one of my newsletters about how I am noticing the lack of art in my life, Sophia was one of the people to comment on that. And it turns out that her path and my path have at least some parallels in it. And so, Sophia, I want to turn it over to you. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from and what your background is and what you're currently doing.
Okay, so first, thank you, Barton, for this invitation. It's really amazing to talk about this. I'm Sofia. I live in Argentina. I born in Mendoza, which is in the west of the country, but now I live in Buenos Aires. I come from the background of in the arts. Um, as I've worked both in the art world and in data analysis. So here the combination of these
Mhm.
two fields. Most of my career has been developed in as a cultural manager, art curator, and also researcher. And over the past 3 years, I began transitioning towards the world of data. I think that maybe having worked with many art collections involving archives and inventories, I gradually started exploring better tools for managing this data. So I eventually immersed myself in the field of data analytics. Um, I know that maybe this sounds a little bit weird, but that was my path, you know.
Well, okay, so I mean, if you're as a curator and as somebody who is working with the inventory, you are keeping track of a lot of things. And I know that in the art world, this is something that like artists don't necessarily do. They take all their stuff, they kind of throw it in a big pile. Um, I have a sister who studied uh, one of her degrees is in curatorial studies, and she got thrown in an unlisted second sub basement for the Calvin Klein in New York City, where they had just been throwing all of their clothes from all of their runway shows for like 30 years and or 40 years. they never cataloged. I mean, they were literally just like in piles and just kind of rolling stuff in there. And then they had a bunch of like old VHS and Betamax tapes of the shows with like, written in marker what show they were from. And so she and the other research assistant had to watch all the videos and find what went with what, because there was no record keeping at all.
Yeah.
Now, since become a museum curator, and she's much more attentive to ideas of let's keep track of what we have, where it's
Exactly.
from, and so you've confronted a bunch of those issues just about the metadata about the data, it's the artwork itself.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's maybe these two words that which may seem different at first glance are actually connected in very interesting ways. You know,
Mhm.
I think that also I don't know, when curating an exhibition, you also first you have to gather information. You know, you have to think about, okay, what you want to communicate, what you want to share about
Mhm.
these artists or the artworks that you are presenting. So I think that pretty much of this work, you know, it's pretty similar to the work of the data analyst, because data analyst is not just analyzing information, it's also organizing, cleaning, you know. um, so I think that this could be a connection.
I think so. It reminds me, just a couple days ago, I was in Chicago, and I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, which is, an enormous museum. And I went through a couple of different exhibitions, and obviously they have the paintings and the pictures and the sculptures on the wall, and you have the option of just kind of walking through and going, okay, that's neat, I don't like that, I want this. But the curator spends an enormous amount of time saying, look, I'm selecting works that have something in common. There's a theme. There's an introductory statement, a paragraph or two, usually on the wall. And there's often, the pieces are presented in a specific order. And you've got the little bit of information that says, the artist and the date and the place. But there's usually also a little bit of text that explains what this piece is about, where it fits in. This is very, very similar to walking a stakeholder through an analysis. I
Yeah,
have data, and I'm not just going to throw it all at you. You need to see it in an order that makes sense,
no,
and I need to explain why it's there and what to pay attention to.
yeah, yeah. I think that maybe the um, this part of telling a story, you know, that in data analysis we say the storytelling, you know, that is a part very crucial of the process, you know. And I think that when curating an exhibition is this: you think about the stories the artworks are telling, or what they are saying to us, or what we want to share with the viewer. And I think that it's about creating a narrative, you know, and guiding people through. In the case of art, is guiding people through emotions, through ideas or reflections. Um, and when I started working with data, I realized it's also about telling stories, because you have all this data, and this data is telling something. And what you find, those patterns that you find, um, you need to communicate to others. You know, you need to explain them. So I think that I was thinking, when you were saying this, I was thinking that art sublimates these stories, you know, the stories of life.
Mhm.
And in a way, I see data the same, you know, as a reflection of human actions, desires, emotions. I don't know. Um,
Well,
So
that's been one of my theories. I've talked about it in a number of other places. I say, first off, data is not something that exists on its own. It only exists once a human decides to gather it, and they create some method of gathering it, of recording it, of organizing it. I mean, so it's a completely human product, which means it's also designed for human goals, and and it fits within that cultural and personal and social context. And what works at one time is going to be dramatically different from another. Now, I'm going to assume that your experience with curation has helped you in some way with some of your data project, and in terms of understanding the context where the data came from, what it means, and how you can do something with the results of your analysis. And is that true?
well, actually, not yet, because all my projects has been in a context of the studies, of the academics. So um, I haven't done yet
Mhm.
my own projects of data, but I remember that I did my first practice in data analysis um, was with a database from Uruguay.
Okay.
Yes, and we analyzed a project, an educational project that they give the students a computer. So they implemented a digital tool in order the students to practice in the computer and, I don't know, learn probably
Mhm.
mathematics in another way, and
Mhm.
allowing them to connect from their homes, or maybe if they lived very far from schools, they could connect anyway. So we analyzed, and I remember that it was really interesting because, to be honest, Uruguay is very close from here, from Buenos Aires,
Mhm.
but it it allows me to have a more profound comprehension of Uruguay and its politics and the distribution of the population, because we analyze the distribution of
Mhm.
the population, and it allows me to yeah, to know um, a little bit more about this country that is next to me,
Mhm.
and understand how this project, because I remember that the hypothesis you say
Yes.
um, was that this project was not that good, and that the students didn't connect, but what we realized, that it was the other way around, that it actually worked, that um, students participate much more with this implementation. So I don't know, I think that um, it is another thing that I realize with data, that sometimes what we see or what we think um, is not exactly that way,
Right.
So when you start analyzing the data that you have, when you start gathering all this data, you discover these things, and sometimes you find out
You know,
new
I,
things, you
to
know
give you a very silly example, I wrote my last newsletter about this. I ride bicycles, and I have now done the same racing course on my single speed bicycle and on my bicycle with gears. I had assumed that I would be much faster on my bike with gears, but actually I was slower. And I did that twice, and it's like, okay, just I'm not touching the gears anymore when I have to. It was the exact opposite of what I expected. Now, that's not an earth-shattering, revelation. But for me, it was so unexpected and the opposite of what I thought. It's actually influencing how I write and what I do. But I wanted to mention something about to follow up on a point you made. Sometimes what feels like a very limited or dry set of facts can really bring some real insights into it. You talk about, learning about the country that's right next to you. So I can think of two things. My grandfather um, uh, is buried at a cemetery a little while a ways away from here. Now, he was born in 1910, and there's a big memorial for his family of origin, that has his parents. And then I never really put together the fact that he was one of 10 children, but only 2 of them lived past a month. Several of them died the same day that they were born, others within a few days, but none, like 8 of them died within a month of being born. And there was only my grandfather and his sister Amy, and they both made it to 90 something years old. But I just look at this and go like, oh my goodness, this is horrifying to think about. You know, I mean, his grandfather died in the flu epidemic, and I mean his father, and just thinking about life was so uncertain when 8 out of your 10 kids die when they're still infants. And then another one is, once upon a time, I was contributing to a project where we're transcribing genealogical records. What it really is immigration records. So people immigrating into the United States. These are mostly from Europe, but it's in the late 1800s, and it's just a list. It's a handwritten ledger, like a spreadsheet, of names and birth dates and locations and how people are connected with each other. And you see, for instance, that the husband is like 40 years older than the wife, and you go, okay, probably not his first wife. And then you'll see something else, and they're bringing their servants with them.
Yeah.
Like, wait, your servant immigrated from Europe to United States with you? That's a huge thing. These were not enslaved people, but they were, I guess, bonded servants. And it was
Yeah.
just, and I can't believe that this enormous thing. And so it just reminded me that life works so differently, and I don't really understand all of this. And so even though it's just a list of names and dates and locations and connections, it didn't answer my questions, but it let me know, oh, there's this whole other world here that I don't know about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that well, it's amazing how this practice of gathering data, organizing, and analyzing could bring so many insights and stories that you never know.
Well, and I'll tell you something else I've said before, and I think this is especially true in your case. It's my belief that people with a background in the arts, the humanities, the liberal arts, the social sciences, who do their work in trying to understand people, and often in these really perplexing, complex situations.
Yeah.
That is so important for working data, because yes, learning how to do an algorithm is challenging, but watch a half dozen videos, spend a couple of days practicing, go to Stack Overflow, copy some code, you'll get there. And
Yeah.
ChatGPT will write the code for you, unless it doesn't. And but it's interpreting and knowing, what does this mean, and are we missing any important questions? And I think that your background in the arts, and especially trying to understand the culture where this person came from, makes a huge difference there.
Yeah, actually, I think that um, because the truth is that behind every piece of data there is a person, you
Yes.
know, and that's the thing, and that's something that I always have in mind. When I see a number, when I analyze a number, I know that I'm looking at someone's life, and I can't stop thinking, who are they? Where do they come from? Where do they live? I don't know. What's their background? And I think that this awareness uh, changes the approach of
Well,
data.
it gives it more value. I mean, the whole point of
Yeah.
analyzing the data is to get insight into the people who generated the data, and
Mhm.
thinking this larger picture about their lives and their motivations and what they're experiencing is gonna it can only make the analysis better. It can
Mhm.
only do that. Now, I want to flip the question around for just a minute because I called this session from data to art, which we've talked about,
Yeah.
but I added on my own in parentheses and back. Now, I want to know if your experience with data has changed the way that you approach art or the way that you think about art, because I know it has for me. But a really easy one is it was when I went on sabbatical about uh, 12, 13 years ago. I went on sabbatical for a year, ostensibly to study data visualization. But in the process, I was enrolled in a program in the Department of Art and Art History at the university, and I started creating art. But it was data oriented art. I was doing 3D motion capture with the Microsoft Kinect, and I was
Wow.
using the same program processing that I use for data visualization to work with the data, and that led to some gallery pieces, a printed piece in another gallery. I mean, big video pieces in a gallery, a printed piece in another gallery, and a whole series of stage productions that
Wow.
included this video processing being done live. So my experience with data changed the way that I did these pieces of art. By the way, my wife is a modern dance choreographer, so she was choreographing the stage pieces, and I was doing these
Wow.
data informed visuals with them. And so for me,
Amazing.
I started in design, I went into psychology and data, and then I ended up doing some of my most creative work ever but drawing on my experience in data. And it seems to me that, like when you're even looking at a piece of art, if you go to a gallery show, if you are reading about an artist, it seems to me that your experience in data must have some kind of influence there. And I'm thinking, do you have any ideas about how it has or how it could influence the way you approach art?
Well, I think that maybe in my case, you
Yes.
know, um, what I realized with data analytics was that um, it's not. I mean, data. It's not only what we do in the virtual world. That I mean, it's not just about our likes or our purchases we make online.
Hmm.
I I remember that when I went to an exhibition after a long time because I was really into data,
Yes.
I thought um, that data also, how do you say, encompasses
Yeah.
what we do and don't do,
Hmm.
who we interact with, and our daily routines. And in a way, it reminds me that data is everything
Yeah.
we are doing,
Yeah.
and I didn't think at that moment directly in art, but I remember that I was in that exhibition. But I thought in my therapist, than the therapy that I do. And I remember that I thought about where um, I look for patterns in my
Yes.
behavior, in my life, to better
Mm-hmm.
understand
Mm-hmm.
myself and
Yep.
my environment.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that I said, I'm doing data analysis in my therapy, with my own life. So data analysis is about finding patterns and uh, decipher large amount of accumulated information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's it's a little bit similar to what we do with our lives when we want to understand something. And I remember that when I was making a project, a curatory project, I used to do that, to gather information, to read about the artists. And I remember that I used to talk a lot with them in order to understand them. And I remember that in many times we joke about we doing a kind of therapy, the curator and the artist, trying to understand the piece of art, and trying to this to find um, information there. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
information that the artists weren't, how do you say, conscious
Yeah.
about that. So I think that um, I I remember that the process, and maybe now that I work with data analysis,
Mm-hmm.
maybe now it's more, that process is more conscious for me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Uh, so, and well, I also when I started studying data, I feel very inspired by these new approaches and projects emerging in the field, like the work of Giorgia Lupi, for example,
Yes. Yes.
or the initiatives by, I remember that I told you, domestic data streamers. They are from Barcelona also. And their creative ways of making data accessible and meaningful, I
Yep.
think that that's resonates with me. I think that in the future, I'd love to work on a curatorial project, maybe that bridge the worlds of art and data.
I
But
think that would be absolutely amazing. Our
yeah,
time is nearly up. I just want to mention a couple of things. Number one is if you're here, you probably came in through LinkedIn, and you can get to Sophia's LinkedIn profile. Now, it should be just on the meeting thing itself. You can just click on that. I will point out that on her contact information, you can also get a link to her GitHub page, and you can see some of her data specific work there as well. And, in the meantime, finding patterns, finding exceptions to patterns, the anomalies and the outliers, and finding associations. These are things that people do all day, every day. And the beautiful thing about what we learn in data analysis is you learn how to be explicit about it. You learn to pay attention to it. Like, is this a pattern or is this an anomaly? And I think the same thing is true in, you can see it in art. You can walk into a gallery and you can do like a cluster analysis. We know why all these paintings are in the same room. We know why this one is unusual and it's different. You can apply some of the same principles there. But more than anything, I think what I love about your history going from art, because I love art, art's wonderful, and I think it gives a lot of meaning, but then
yeah,
taking that and branching out from the work that you were doing in the art world into the data world, um, and bringing a whole other dimension, and I mean, opening up a new set of possibilities for you, but bringing in this sensitivity to the people behind the data and what it means makes such an enormous difference to give your work value. And with that, our time is up. But Sofía, I'm so glad that you could join me tonight.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
as a reminder, this session will be available as a video immediately after we're done on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And you can reach out to me, and of course, you can follow Sofía on LinkedIn.
Sure.
And anything else you'd like to say before we go?
No, thank you. And I really love to talk about these things. I haven't had the opportunity of discuss this relation, so I'm glad. I'm glad about that.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Well, I'm going to hit end stream, and so those of you out there, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to hear from you again in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye.